Hi all, in this session we will see about async await. Okay, so the async await, you should not consider it as an alternative to promise. It does not replace promise. It's just a comfortable way to write promise. That's it. Rather than writing then everywhere, it is just a comfortable way to write promise. Okay, so before proceeding, let's first see about async. So it is async and await, right? First let us understand what is async function. So whenever you put a function as async, what happens is whatever the content in that function gets wrapped inside a promise. Okay, so even if you have a synchronous you return something synchronously, that also gets wrapped inside a promise. So this is what you have to understand. So for let's first understand for a sync function. If you have a synchronous function, if you put async in that, what will happen? Okay, just before that I wanted to show you so before moving to async function, I just wanted to show you this is how the normal, this is a promise which returns a promise. If you don't use async await, this is how you have to write. So here I am just writing this promise function inside a promise because my requirement is to add 3 to what gets resolved, and I am resolving that value so that I can take 1003 from this function. When I put then that function dot then, I would want that resolved value from this function 3 to be added to that function, and I want to print it here. In that case, what I need to do, okay, here if I get data out of it, console.log data. So I just wanted to show you how simple async await does it and does the job. So my requirement is to add 3 to this returned resolve. Okay, for that in a normal promise function, I have to write dot then data and add 3 value to it, and then I have to resolve that value so that that value can be taken from the data here. Okay, if you execute this, you will get 1003 as value. But using the same thing can be done using async await easily. Just put async await and this will do the same job, but this will be created for you. So this is how simple async await does it for you. So now let's understand async. Okay, let me I will, so let this be a normal function. So okay, so let me do async for a synchronous function. Okay, so the moment you put async, right, in any function, what happens is that gets wrapped inside a promise. Okay, even if you, I'm just returning 1 here. Okay, maybe this can be put inside a variable like fun3 or something. Okay, the moment you put async in any function, this function content becomes wrapped in a promise, and this 1 becomes, if you see console log func3, you will be amazed to see that it returns a promise, but we didn't do any promise here, right? We didn't return a promise. If you try to print this, you will see that func3 is a promise, so you can actually do then here. So it becomes a async function. So how did this happen? It all happened because of this async keyword. So when you add a async keyword inside a function, it becomes wrapped in a promise, and that promise gets returned. And moment that async function returns a value, the promise gets resolved with a value. So this gets converted to something like this. I'll show you. So internally, the async, what it will do, I'll just remove because I wanted to show. So this gets converted to something like this. Return new promise. You know that promise takes two values, resolve and reject. And it becomes resolve. It gets resolved with the returned value. Okay. The async function, it creates a promise, and the promise gets resolved with the returned value. This is what happens in how it gets converted as a normal function. Moment you put async, it creates a promise around the content you have put inside the function, and it gets resolved with the return value. This is what it happens for a synchronous function. Okay, you understand? So for async function, always you have to get the value out of a async function, you have to put then, because it returns a promise. You have to put then, and then only you can get the value. If you want to get the value of this, you have to put function 3.then. Okay, maybe you put something like this, and you put the data here. Data, because I want to get the value out of this. Okay, now if you do, you should be getting the value 1. Maybe you make this func normal. Okay, so let this be. Now you should get the value 1, right? Because the async function creates a promise and gets resolved with the return value. Okay, see the error. Sorry, you have to actually execute the function, then only it will return a promise. Okay, you have to execute that function. Let me run it now. So you got 1 value, right? See, you are able to see the 1 value. Okay, the similar case will happen if you do func normal also, which is the same thing, how your async function will get converted to. You are able to see 1. Fine. So this is what it happens in the case of async function, synchronous function. Now let's see in case of asynchronous function what will happen. So asynchronous function will have a promise or some callback, so that it will not happen in the same synchronously. Okay, maybe I will write a function func async. So I will I already have a promise which resolves with 1000. Okay, this is a asynchronous function, right? Because okay, let me make it asynchronous. I will put set timeout. Okay, let me happen. Maybe let it happen after 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so I have this is a asynchronous function, right? This one maybe I can comment this. Okay, this can be removed so that it gives little more clarity. Okay, so this is a asynchronous function, right? Promise function is a asynchronous function. So to make this function as asynchronous, let me call this function. Okay. Okay, and inside this asynchronous function, okay, I want to add 3 to this whatever gets resolved. How will I do it? What I will do it normally is like this, right? Whatever gets resolved, I want to add 1003. We'll add a dot then, and the data what? Here I will receive 1000. So to that 1000, I am adding some, I am creating a value equal to data plus 3. Okay. Now let me do this async dot then, because I want to print the value 1003. I want to print. How will I print it? So okay, I have something like this. Let me be val value console.log val. So we are now seeing about asynchronous function, right? I will put async here. Okay. So what will happen now? Let me return this value. Return val. So as I told you, all async function will be wrapped inside a promise, and it will get resolved with the value. So even in this case, okay, the promise will be resolved with this value. Even for asynchronous case, promise function will get resolved with this value. Okay, we can check that. So it will get resolved with 1000. Even though it is asynchronous functions, you have put async here, so it will get resolved with this returned value. Okay, so if you do async await here, sorry, I have not called it. Sorry. You have to call this. Okay, let me call this function now. So here also you have to return that function. Okay, now you can see that. Okay, so the async function will get resolved with the return value even in the case of async, in the case of asynchronous function. Just because you put async, all this content will go inside a promise. Okay, it will if you want to see how this will get converted, let me do that. So then if you want to do it without async, so what you have to do in this case, what will happen is it will get wrapped inside a promise, new promise, resolve, comma, reject. So this is a promise object, right? Promise object. So this promise object will get written down. Okay, you are able to see. So this simple async function will get converted as this one. So this content will be wrapped within a promise, and whatever you return here, right, it will get resolved here. This promise object will get resolved with this value. Thank you. So it will get changed like this. Okay, so you will have a value you return. Now you have to put a result here as well. Okay, and you return the promise object. So this simple stuff which gets happened in with the async, it gets converted like this. It creates a promise and wraps this content inside that, and it resolves whatever is getting returned from here. Okay, so this is what happens in the case of asynchronous function. Okay, now let's move on to, so as I told you, for sync function it will create a promise and get resolved automatically immediately. For async function it will create a promise and it will resolve when the value is returned. Okay, so always it gets resolved with the value returned. So this happens even for synchronous and as well as asynchronous function. Okay, but for asynchronous function, if you see that whatever asynchronous function, the promise you have, when it gets resolved and whatever you return from that, it gets resolved with that. Okay, but in the case of synchronous function, it gets resolved with the value returned. Okay, now let's move to await. Okay, so if you take in the case of await, it just passes the execution of the function till the promise is getting resolved. Only after that, whatever statement you have after await will happen. Okay, so one rule we have is await will always be inside a async function. That you have to remember. Okay, now let's change this. Okay, you have right this. So this is need not be there. So this is completely removed. We have this one, right? This can be completely removed with the help of await. What you have to do is, so what we are doing here is, after the promise is resolved, we are trying to add 3 to this, and return in that value. So that value gets, so the async will take care of resolving the promise it created with the value returned. Now with the help of await, we can remove this completely. We can remove the then. Okay. So instead of then, we can put directly await here. Okay. And let me have a put that value resolved to this value. Maybe it can be a let. Okay. What await will do is it will block the execution here. Okay. Block the execution here. And it will return the value only when the promise gets resolved. That is, it gets resolved after 1000 milliseconds. Only after that this value will come, and the statements after that will get executed. Okay. When this function, since this is a async function, it would have already returned a promise. Okay, it would have already returned a promise, and here you have to other thing you have to understand is it will block the execution, but it will not the thread will be still available for doing anything else. It will not block the main thread. Await will not block the main thread. It will just put that whatever you do, right? This one, when you do it with then, it actually goes inside the event loop. Same thing will happen here also. It will once the value comes, then these values will be executed by the event loop. That one will be taken care by the JavaScript. So it will not block the main thread for any reason. It will just put all the statements after that inside the event loop. Those things will get executed once the value comes from this promise function. Okay. Now it will, as I told you, the value will be coming with 1000. In the success case, it will return, it will get 1000 here. Okay. And we are adding the value 3 to that. Okay, understand? Assume that we are adding 3 to that, and we are returning value. Now what will happen? As I told you, async function would have created a promise over this, and it will resolve this with this value. So that will be available here. Okay. This can be commented. So it will be available here. So that if you try to print this value, okay, so let me put a thing here. So all this are not needed now. Okay. So you can see how simple it has become. So now if you execute without then, we are able to execute with await. Now the 1003 gets printed here. Okay. So this happens in the case of success case. So await, as I told you, it will block the execution, and the statements after this will get executed only once the promise function gets resolved, and it will return the value. The async function, the async keyword, will take care of resolving the promise it created. So once it promise gets resolved, these whatever you have in the then will get executed. Okay, this happens in the case of success function. Okay, this is what we saw. Promise success. If in case the promise gets rejected here, I sent reject here, what will happen? If it gets rejected here, so it if any reject happens, it is like similar to calling new error. What you would have seen, right? it is similar to calling new error. So new error would be called with the value what it was resolved here, rejected here. Maybe it gets rejected with failure. So what will happen is it will throw new error with failure because the promise got rejected. So in this case it will get rejected here. You can either do try catch, okay, try catch and catch it here, or else what will happen is new error failure, it will be passed to here and you can receive it with like this, the reject or dot catch of the promise. So if I say reject reason, so the async function will take care to make sure to send the error to the calling function. Okay. Now if you see, we should be able to see the reason with which it got rejected. Maybe the failure which gets passed to the this await. Once this promise returns a new error, this will get propagated to here, okay, to the promise reject reason, because it will be this second callback will be called, because any reject happens it will go to the second callback of the promise. Okay, maybe we can print it here. So you are able to see reject reason and the failure which got propagated from this promise function, and this reject get thrown as a new error and we are able to receive it here. We can also do it like this. Instead of allowing to propagate to the calling function, that is this one, we can actually catch it here by using try. So using try catch, you have to do it like this. That is, we are putting that the await inside the try and catch. You can see the error here. Whatever got the reason with which it got rejected. Maybe error. Okay. So this reference error is happening. So we can try to do it once again. Here you can see that. So we are getting error failure here itself, rather than it getting propagated here. Okay. Fine. So hope you understood this. Okay, when a failure happens, the error gets thrown in the await where the await is called, and either you can do try catch, okay, or you can try to propagate the error to the calling function, and it will be received in the reject callback of your promise. Okay, such as we understood that the async function will take care to resolve the promise with the return value of that async function, and the await just makes it to wait, and after that the statements after that will get executed. Okay, hope you understood. Thank you guys.